Welcome back to This is Baseball. It is March, and spring training is well underway. One of the bigger stories coming out of spring training right now is uniforms. And usually, there's not a lot of talk about uniforms unless somebody unveils a new alternate or changes some sort of design on their uniform. This time around, uniforms are being talked about in a negative way. So, Nike and Fanatics are making the uniforms, and they made some changes in 2024. Most notably to the names on the back of the jerseys, the player names. And they just look really weird. The lettering is really tiny, very hard to read. And what's interesting about it is, so I follow the Royals. I'm a Royals fan. And I wasn't understanding what everybody was talking about with the uniforms, because I was looking at the Royals and I'm like, those don't look any different than the uniforms that they've always been wearing. Come to find out, the Royals literally asked the league if they could just wear the old uniforms, and the league granted them permission to do that. So the Royals are the best looking team in all of baseball right now because they're wearing last year's uniforms. Theirs look normal. Everybody else's has weird tiny lettering that seems like it's not printed like in line or how it's supposed to look. It just looks really bad. You've had reports of the pants being see-through and people coming to the ballpark and getting a baseball game and a show from the players, which is obviously not something that you want to happen. And the MLB Players Association has come out and obviously raised their concern for the uniforms, and they're hoping that MLB and Nike and Fanatics and everybody comes together and addresses this and gets this fixed before the season starts. And I think the idea for these uniforms, I don't really understand why they changed the lettering and all the things that they did with that, but I think the idea was to make a lighter uniform because obviously baseball is played in the summer, in the heat of the summer, so you want it to be a little bit cooler for the players. Unfortunately, nobody has anything good to say about these uniforms, so I'm imagining that they will probably revert to the uniforms that we have all been familiar with leading into this season. I don't know how you mess up uniforms as bad as Nike and Fanatics have, but they managed to do it, and they managed to make the highest professional league in the world in Major League Baseball have all their players look just kind of silly and like a rec league almost. It might be a little extreme, but I was not planning on having to talk about the debacle of Major League Baseball uniforms. And as I stated when I opened the show, it is March, which means we are officially, or less than a month, or we are in the month of regular season baseball. The official opening day is Thursday, March 28th for all teams. I know that the Dodgers and the Padres will play in Korea on March 20th. That will count towards the standings, but the official opening day is March 28th. So we are right there, and it's kind of wild how it works because the offseason feels so slow. And then the Super Bowl happens, football ends, and then all of a sudden it's just like it's June already, and we're already talking about buyers and sellers at the trade deadline. So I am just very excited. I'll also be attending my first opening day in about 8 years in Kansas City. So looking very forward to that, especially for a Kansas City Royals team that should be much improved from last season. Obviously, the Royals ended last season with 106 losses, one of their worst seasons in franchise history, and have odds to have about a 14 game improvement this season based off of the Pacoda projections. And I was looking at the Pacoda projections because it's something that I look at and I kind of laugh at every year, but I realize it's a good resource. It's a good projection to look at. And obviously projections are something that you need to take with a grain of salt, but I was looking at the American League Central specifically, and I think a week ago I said, I'm not very high on Minnesota, the Twins. The Twins are the favorites to win a very weak Central, and I think the Twins were sitting at about an 89 and 90 win projection based off of these odds, and I'm looking at it right now, and they're sitting at 85 wins. So they've dropped 5 wins since it's been a week or two since I've looked at this. And that makes a lot of sense to me. I actually feel like the AL Central is going to be a division where, maybe 83 or 84 wins gets the job done for you. Obviously, that's probably not going to be good enough for like a wild card slot at all, but the beauty of baseball is as long as you are the best record in your division, you're going to make the playoffs, even if it's completely terrible. And that's something that could happen in the American League Central. Like, to me, I wouldn't be surprised. They have Cleveland sitting in second place at 83 wins, Detroit at 75, Kansas City at 70, 71. And I've already said, like, Kansas City would need to have like a 33 or probably a 30 game swing, 30 win improvement in order to win that division. But to me, like, it wouldn't shock me if Cleveland or Detroit ended up winning the American League Central. I think I'm not that high on Cleveland, but I'll be interested to see, and we'll revisit this closer to opening day, but I'll be interested to see what the Pacoda, I don't know why I'm having trouble saying that, the Pacoda odds look like, because I'll be curious if Minnesota comes down even further than they have in the last week or so. And usually when I look at the Pacoda odds, like I said earlier, I just kind of laugh at them because they just seem a little bit ridiculous. But I'm looking at this for the most part, like it seems mostly kind of in my line of thinking. Like, I look at the AL East, and this is probably the one division that I'm like, I don't know about all that. It has New York at 94 wins, which I don't see. Toronto with 88, which that's about kind of where they've been during their run. Tampa, 87 wins. I see that. I think Tampa is actually going to take a step back this year. I still think that they could be a wild card team, but the one that surprised me was having Baltimore in 4th place with 86 wins. I think that that's disrespectful to Baltimore for the season they obviously had last year with the 100-plus win season and winning the American League East. I think that they'll be up there towards the top of that division because I don't think that New York is going to be that good again. I think that they have a lot of problems, and I just don't see them winning 94, 95 games this year. But I already talked about the Central, but the American League West, they have Houston, 95 wins. I like Houston. I've said it during the offseason. I don't see any reason to believe that Houston won't be back in the ALCS this season, fighting for a chance to go to another World Series. Maybe that's an indictment on the rest of the American League that Houston has been able to go on this kind of dynastic run for, the last 7-8 years. But Texas, 86 wins. I have them closer to 90 wins. Seattle, 84 wins. That's about right for me. I think that Seattle is just kind of that hype team that you want to do well, but just don't really see it. And then Los Angeles Angels, 73 wins. And honestly, it's just kind of sad, that franchise. And if I go over to the National League in the East, the Atlanta Braves, 100 wins projected. That makes sense. I would say that too. 100 to 105 wins. That's just the Braves. They're probably on paper the second best team in the National League, if not the entire Major League Baseball, behind the Los Angeles Dodgers. The Philadelphia Phillies at 85 wins, and I think that that's a little bit low. I see them at 91, 92 wins. Just even looking back to last year, their roster hasn't really changed, and I think that they were better last year than their record said they were. So I think that with everybody hopefully healthy this year, that they'll actually be in that, like I said, lower 90s win total and still be a wild card team because they're not gonna beat the Braves. But NL Central, St. Louis, they have St. Louis back at the top of that division. I think that that's accurate. 85 wins, and that seems about right. They're kind of a weak division as well. I think St. Louis, their big question mark was pitching in the offseason. They obviously addressed a lot of those concerns. They brought in Sonny Gray, Lance Lynn, Kyle Gibson, and already have a pretty solid lineup. So I do see St. Louis being back at the top. Chicago and Milwaukee are kind of neck and neck there in the standings. I think Milwaukee will be kind of an interesting team to watch because obviously Craig Counsell departed and went to the Cubs, and we'll see if Milwaukee is, going to continue to be that perennial contender. I don't think that they will be. I think that their kind of window is going to close a little bit. With Chicago Cubs, we'll see how good of a manager Craig Counsell actually is, because they brought him in and have essentially done nothing. They just now re-signed Cody Bellinger. So Chicago Cubs honestly had a really disappointing offseason, in my opinion. I'm glad that they got Cody Bellinger back, but other than that, nothing has really happened. I thought that this would be their chance to really take over the National League Central, and I thought that them getting Craig Counsell as their manager was going to be kind of this sign that that's what they were going to do as a franchise, and see that St. Louis was a little bit vulnerable to somebody taking over. And St. Louis, I think they saw that as well and realized that they needed to take care of some holes in their roster, and they did exactly that, where Chicago just kind of sat on their hands and did nothing. So I like St. Louis in the National League Central. And then finally in the National League West, the Los Angeles Dodgers, 100 wins, and that obviously makes a ton of sense with all of the moves that they did. We have all seen it. Shohei Ohtani, Yamamoto, Tyler Glasnow, Teoscar Hernandez, and then obviously all of the people that they already had on their roster, Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts. Just a solid team that has very high expectations. They're going to be under a microscope all season long, and obviously a lock for October, but I think their biggest hurdle is going to be that division round, and that's along with the Atlanta Braves. They're both likely going to have that first round bye, and neither of them have been able to overcome that break. So I think the story will be not can they get into October, but how deep into the postseason can those two teams go? Because on paper, they should be the two teams, Atlanta and Los Angeles. They should be the two teams that meet in that NLCS series. But, will Atlanta and Philly go for round 3, and can Atlanta finally take Philly out? Will Los Angeles obviously overcome their issues as well in October? And again, have high expectations with the over $1 billion that they have invested into players this offseason. They've got to get, multiple rings to justify all those moves. And the clock's going to start ticking on March 28th for them. Arizona in second place, 85 wins. I think that's fair. I think Arizona will be another fun team. Probably could make the playoffs again, just because, again, the NL Central super weak. NL East is kind of down outside of Atlanta and Philadelphia. And then, the NL West, San Francisco, 82 wins. They could be a team that could potentially be a little bit better than that. Could creep into that 85, 86 win range as well, and maybe leapfrog Arizona in the standings. But I don't know. We'll take a look at all of this a little bit closer to opening day as well, just to see kind of what's moved, and go from there and give a little bit of a better outlook on how the season might go. I'm excited to get there. Obviously, we're a couple weeks out from that, but it'll be here before we know it. I'm so ready for it. I'm so ready for the season. And going back to the Royals, obviously I'll talk about them a lot between now and the opening day, and obviously end of the season as well. But I'm just very optimistic and excited for what they can do. And I'm trying not to talk myself into something nonsensical about them winning the American League Central, but it's just, there's a part of me, like I said, I'm not high on Minnesota or really anybody in this division. So it's like, you just never know. I think that the Royals have a really solid lineup, and that showed last season. I think obviously their biggest issue was pitching, from just the whole roster of pitching. Like it didn't matter who it was. It just wasn't good. And obviously they brought in a lot of, same way that the Cardinals did. And not to say that the Cardinals and the Royals are, on the same tier, because obviously the Cardinals have been a significantly better franchise over the last, 30 years. But Kansas City brought in Michael Wacha, brought in Seth Lugo, brought in Will Smith, brought in other players, other veterans, other people that have won, and hopefully can plug in and be dominant and be serviceable for the Royals, and support a player like Cole Reagans, who's going to be a legitimate star, legitimate Cy Young contender in the league, and hopefully get somebody like Brady Singer to maybe be in that 2022 Brady Singer form that he was in, where he was in Cy Young conversations. And then maybe down the road, Daniel Lynch jumps into that rotation as well. And then they're just really good 1 through 5. And obviously that's just, the fan in me of wanting my hometown team to do really well, because it's been a very long time. It's been about 10 years since they've made the playoffs, and been 8 years since they've even been competitive. So I'm eager to see what they do. I know that they're not going to be as bad as they were last year, and they're going to have a significant improvement. It's just how much of an improvement are they going to make? they could surprise us. But that's all I have for you this week. I will see you in a couple weeks, a little bit closer to opening day. Thank you so much for listening this week. I will see you next time.